music's blaring in my ears. Engines roaring, roaring, roaring. The horizon's drawing near. Pedal to the floor, no more feet in the door. Gonna drive right out of this bitter...
Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. My name is David Unger, and I'm pleased to be hosting a show with executive directors and key people of local nonprofits. I've worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years. In those years, I've realized that the majority of the community does not know about the organizations that provide critical services we sometimes take for granted. Most times, they only hear about nonprofits when you get a letter asking for money. This is a chance to hear about the organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed on Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff, underwriters, or USM. As we all know, this is an exciting time for Maine with a three-way race for governor this November. Nonprofit Insider is pleased to be able to bring the three candidates to the studio to get their views and thoughts on the nonprofit community in Maine. This is live and only on WMPG. Today we have Eliot Cutler, independent candidate for governor. Welcome to Nonprofit Insider.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
Well, so talk to us a little bit about your perceptions of what you feel the health of nonprofits are in the state today.
You know, it's interesting, David. I'm involved in in more than two not-for-profits, but I have principal roles in two. One is my political campaign, which is very definitely a not-for-profit organization, and the other is a foundation called the Lerner Foundation, where I'm the president. We give away about $600,000 or so a year to Maine organizations that are doing good works in the communities of Maine. And you know, so on the one hand, I have a very deep appreciation for the work that not-for-profits do in Maine. It's important. It's particularly important in a state where we have so many people in need of the services that not-for-profits provide. But at the same time, I worry a great deal about the percentage expressed in any number of ways of the Maine economy that is taken up in not-for-profit and government activities. Because what that says, among other things, is that our economy in Maine is not performing very well, and it's not. We've had a declining economy against the rest of New England now for 11 straight years, bringing us to a point where our incomes, our incomes in Maine are 40% below the average for New England, 25% below the rest of America. Now, what that does is it creates a huge demand for the services of a lot of not-for-profits. But at the same time, over time, it shrinks our ability to sustain our not-for-profits. So I'm afraid we don't have the right balance in Maine. I have deep appreciation for what we're doing, but I worry about our future.
So halfway through the show, I usually give a trivia question, but you led right into the question, so I want to follow up a little bit about that. So, and I won't ask it as a question, but 1 in every 7 people in the state of Maine are employed by the nonprofit community. And that statistic came from the Maine Association Sector Report 2013, published by the Maine Association of Nonprofits. So you're saying you think that number might be too high or too low?
No, I'm saying that when you take the following sectors, not-profit, local government, and state government, we're now talking about 3 of the top 9 sectors in employment in the Maine economy. And one of the things that suggests, and you can see the evidence of it in what I just said about Maine's declining economy. Maine's economy is in a tailspin. And the more we go into a tailspin, and it was evident in the last recession when employment in the not-for-profit sector increased significantly, and employment in the conventional sectors of the economy decreased, what we see over an 11-year period is a chronic case of that circumstance where over 11 years the economic activity in the state of Maine has declined against the rest of New England year after year after year, inexorably. When you combine that tailspin with Maine's demographics, we're the oldest population in America and getting older faster than any other state. It's a toxic combination for our economy, for the future of this state. We are not doing well. And so on the one hand, we're caught in a real Hobson's choice. We need the not-for-profit sector because it helps support a lot of people in need. But at the same time, our ability as a community in the state of Maine to support and sustain our own not-for-profit sector is in a tailspin. That's the challenge. We've got to turn Maine's economy around. And to me, turning the evidence of our ability to turn the Maine economy around is not increasing employment in the not-for-profit sector. And I say that with all respect.
Right. And, I've experienced some of that. When the money's tight, nonprofits really focus more on their core mission and go back to why they were really established versus all the auxiliary programs that they put out there to attract new donors and new funding. So I see a lot of truth to that. One of the things that's coming across is this whole concept of property taxes, and should nonprofits be paying property taxes to pay for some of the services that they do receive from communities? What are your thoughts and feelings about that?
Well, let's look at before we get at an answer, let's look at the context for the question. The context for the question is this. Over the course of the last several years, now pretty much most of a decade, the amount of money that's been returned by the state government to cities and states has been declining. Indeed, it's dried up now to about $85 million a year. That's put a real squeeze on towns and cities across the state of Maine who have been forced to raise the only source of revenue they have, which is property taxes. They've been forced to raise property taxes in order to make up for what's not coming from broadly based tax revenue at the state level. It's a horrible mistake, and it's a mistake that our current governor has committed in spades. It was started by his predecessor, Mr. Baldacci, the Democrat, but Mr. LePage, the Republican, has made it awful. So cities and towns across the state of Maine, particularly service center cities, and there are about 75 of them in Maine, those cities and towns are being desperately squeezed on the revenue side, but they're being expected by the people who live and work there, including in not-for-profit agencies, to continue to provide services.
Whether they call 911.
They call 911 when they need the streets plowed after a big snowstorm, whenever. So I think that we need to give some thought, not to whether not-for-profits ought to be paying property taxes, because I'm not ready to go there. That really compromises in a very serious way the tax-exempt status for not-for-profits. But I do think we need to look at whether we ought to regularize in ways we haven't in the state, normalize in ways we haven't, the appropriate requirements for not-for-profits to make payments in lieu of taxes, pilots, so-called, in order to help the towns and cities where they're doing business get by, because our towns and cities in Maine are in a real crunch.
Back in the mid-'90s, I think it was Erie, Pennsylvania, that had the first pilot case that went to court where the city of Erie was suing the hospitals for payment in lieu of taxes. And I was an executive director of an agency in Pennsylvania while this was happening, and it had a ripple effect. And The discussions both on the leadership side and the nonprofit side were very productive. I think, if the nonprofits were brought to the table for the discussion,
which I think they should be,
there could be a good balance because they do receive the services, and that is my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue against some remedy to the problem. We've just got to come up with what the right remedy is, and there's no question in my mind that in that discussion you got to have the not-for-profits at the table. And there are other issues involved, obviously, with respect to churches. There's the constitutional separation of church and state that's implicated. With respect to hospitals and universities, there are a lot of issues involved with.
You mean like the concept of private offices using tax-exempt property?
Sure. or hospitals where you have employees with enormous salaries. These are businesses. And the fact that they're not for profit is important, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Right. So you come at this from two perspectives, one as a nonprofit and one as a funder. Do you see the requests that are coming across your plate?
Well, and also as a contributor.
And a contributor, yes. Do you see the requests that come across your plate through the foundation increasing?
Yes. And part of that's a function of the fact that the Lerner Foundation is, is becoming better known.
Right.
And the fact that you're better known tends to be a leading indicator of the number of requests for funding that we're going to get. But we're also seeing, and I must say that this is encouraging, we're seeing an awful lot of innovative, stimulating ideas and proposals coming across our desk too. I've also been a believer that foundations like the Lerner Foundation ought to be using whatever leverage we can muster as a funder,
right,
to help increase skills and efficiencies in the not-for-profit sector. You can make a very good case, and certainly Meg Baxter, who's now at the Mitchell Institute, but
Meg
what did I say?
You just said Baxter. So,
Meg Baxter,
right.
Was a very wonderful woman and a very good friend, close friend. Meg, when she was at the United Way, really led the effort in Maine to encourage mergers and combinations among not-for-profits in order to increase effectiveness and efficiency. That's something that we need to pay a lot of attention to in Maine.
I'm very mixed about merging nonprofits for a lot of different reasons. The agency that I was the executive director of here, we merged 3 agencies into one. And it did create some problems, and it's not as smooth and easy as people think it might be.
Not at all. But I think the measure is over the course of, say, 5 years, whether at the end of 5 years, which is a reasonable period to achieve, an effective merger, whether over the course of 5 years, at the end of that time, the missions of that are pursued by the formerly 3 and now 1 agency are being better met.
Yes.
Whether there's more effectiveness, whether we're achieving more for more value, more VFM, more value for the dollar, value for the money. We have we're a big state.
Absolutely.
With very few of us living here. I mean, we're responsible, 1,300,000 of us are responsible for this huge piece of real estate, and a lot of people, many of whom need our help, and we can't afford to do our to render that assistance and do public service in ways that are inefficient. We just don't have enough money to do that.
This is Nonprofit Insider on WMPG, and I'm David Unger, and today we are talking to Eliot Cutler, independent candidate for the governor of the state of Maine. I Understanding that there are different types of nonprofits in the state. Some are mandated by the state and federal government, then they're hospitals, social services, arts. Do you feel the state has a responsibility to support the nonprofit community?
I wouldn't. I'd rather say that I think the state has a responsibility and an opportunity to work effectively and cooperatively and collaboratively with the not-for-profit community. There are a lot of resources available to the state and to the public in and among the not-for-profit agencies in the state. And they can be extenders of the state's abilities to do what we expect and need and want government to do. I don't really like to think of it in terms of a governmental responsibility to support not-for-profits. I think there's a governmental responsibility to do the work government has to do in ways that are cost-effective, that get at the problem, that are efficient, and oftentimes that drives you towards collaboration and better collaboration with not-for-profits. And, you know, one of the best examples of this is in the education and training sectors. You know, the state has a responsibility to lead the way to a productive, healthy, skilled, and trained workforce. It can't do it by itself. It needs the cooperation of educational institutions in the state of Maine. It needs the cooperation of agencies that work on workforce issues in the state of Maine, not-for-profits. It needs the cooperation of employers in the state of Maine who need more skilled workers. It's a complicated effort where the state's responsibility is to try to marshal our resources in Maine in the best possible ways. That's my view of it. I don't like to think of it in terms of a government responsibility to simply support not-for-profits. No.
But you described it as, I could see how that would happen. You know, by doing these collaborations and partnerships.
Well, sorry about that. I just had a little technical difficulty. I knocked the mic off its stand in reaction to what David was saying. I got so excited. No, it is a, but it's affirmatively not, in my view, a responsibility to support just for the sake of supporting not-for-profits. It's a responsibility to do a job that the government's obligated to do, which need to be, and it's a set of jobs that needs to be reasonably limited, and to do so in the most effective and efficient ways.
I'm going to be careful what I say here because some people will know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm working with this organization now that is tied into a lot of different state organizations. And the people involved in the state organizations are great individually.
You mean state government?
State government. But watching them kind of trip over each other and figure out who's on first base at times is really confusing.
Well, it is, and it's bad management and bad leadership that makes that happen. Everyone who has a job, whether it's in a government or whether it's in a not-for-profit or whether it's in a for-profit company or business, everyone who has a job wants to one degree or another, protect his or her own turf, and in many cases to expand the turf.
Right.
Why? Well, because it means that they're more likely to keep their job and maybe get paid more money and be more important, and those are all understandable objectives. But a manager's job, a governor's job, a leader's job is to try to keep all those human instincts under some semblance of control, so that government does a good job drawing on the lowest possible public cost to do it.
Right.
And it's a challenge. I mean, I've been in government. I've worked for Ed Muskie for 7 years. Saw it from that perspective. I was associate director of the Office of Management and Budget the White House for 3 years. I was responsible for the policies and the budgets of a dozen or so federal agencies and departments, and it's like herding cats. It's a challenge, but it's really important, and it's really important to have a definite set of goals, a vision, plans, and strategies that the people in the workforce, in this case the public sector workforce, can subscribe to.
Right. Last week we had the opportunity to have Susan Lamb on the show. Susan is the executive director of the Maine chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. I asked her what she perceived the largest problem facing Maine, and immediately she gave me her response, which totally caught me off guard. She said it was the lack of dental care in the state. And then in the May 5th edition of Maine Biz, they also had a very large article explaining and outlining this problem. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I read the article in Maine Biz, and I've been reading about the shortage of dentists in Maine actually for quite some time. I mean, for decades. It's been a problem, and it's not a problem in the urban centers of Maine, in our metropolitan areas.
Right.
I mean, there's no problem here in Portland. But when you go down east, when you go up north, when you go into some of the rim counties, it is desperately difficult for a lot of people to find dentists or to find dental care. That has a cascade of problems, or a whole set of problems cascades from that fact. I mean, when people's teeth go bad and they can't get them fixed, the consequences range from difficulty getting a job to difficulty eating, nourishing themselves. It's a real problem. I don't happen to think, I mean, it is an acute problem in a lot of parts of the state of Maine. Now, we now have a new dental school at the University of New England. That's going to help.
But that's going to take years.
Well, it's going to take years, but I mean, the real crisis is going to happen when a lot of our dentists, who are as old as you and I are, David, begin to attrit out of practice. And when that happens, we've got to replace them, and we've got to increase the number of dentists. So it's a good thing we've got the University of New England dental program. It's a good thing that we have the Tufts program. But it is a challenge in Maine, and the legislature acknowledged that challenge and expanded the range of services that can be offered now by non-dentist trained hygienists. That's a good thing in my view. That was the right thing to do. But is this the biggest problem facing the state of Maine? I don't think so. I think the biggest problem facing the state of Maine is jobs and the economy. And I go back to what I've said 2 or 3 times already. We've had an 11-year, year-by-year, inexorable decline in Maine's economy against the rest of New England. It's been through 8 years of a Democratic governor, 3 years of a Republican governor. That's got to be turned around. That is the biggest single challenge facing the state. And we're not going to be able to do it by thinking out, by reading from the same hymn book that we've been reading from for 11 years. We're not going to be able to do it by looking through the rearview mirror and trying to find our future back in 20 years ago.
So, let's say we have 30 seconds left on the show.
Do we?
No, but I'm only going to give you 30 seconds.
Oh.
We have 5 minutes left.
Good luck. Good luck with giving me only 30 seconds.
I'll tell Chris to cut the mic, okay? Why should you be elected governor?
Because I have a vision and a plan and a strategy to turn around Maine's economy. Because I'm unbought and unbossed. I don't take money from special interest PACs. Because I am not beholden to one narrow ideology or the other like my 2 opponents. And because I have a much wider set of experiences than either of them, probably than both of them put together.
Okay, and you came in under time. Good. Can you?
See, if you give me a challenge, I tend to try to respond.
All right. Can you share with our listeners maybe one little tidbit about you that maybe nobody knows about?
At this point, At this point, I think everybody knows everything they want to know about it. That's an interesting question. I'm going to take 30 seconds to think
about it.
Dead air. Not many people, some people, not many people know how close-knit a family I come from. My grandfather was an immigrant, like a lot of our grandfathers.
Right.
He was an immigrant. He was a peddler, and he came here to Maine at the age of 12 from what is now Belarus in Eastern Europe. And he spent the first 7 years of his life in Maine, from 12 to 19, walking from Bangor to Calais and back on the airline as a peddler. He sold notions to people who lived on Route 9. And he had no money, he had no family here. He didn't speak English when he got here. He was 12 years old. And he and I were very close when I was growing up. He used to take me for bus rides in Bangor. And I learned from him and from the experience my mother had growing up as his daughter, the importance of opportunity. You can't guarantee people's outcomes in life, but you can, and government needs to, and the not-for-profit sector helps do it. You can and have to provide everyone with an opportunity to make the most of his or her own potential as a human being. That is something I share with my two brothers. We now live in the 3 points of a 3-mile sided equilateral triangle here in the Portland area. It's a very close family, and I'm proud of it and gratified by it and owe a lot to it.
Well, good stuff. Well, thank you for being a guest on Nonprofit Insider. This was exciting, and we're glad to be able to understand some of your positions on nonprofits. Nonprofit Insider will be hosting Governor Paul LePage on July 18th and Representative Mike Michaud on August 22nd. And next week, Lisa Pullman, Executive Director of the Natural Resources Council of Maine, will be joining us. The music appears courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find Mike on www.michaelhubbardmusic.com. Check out Mike's website to see where he's playing this weekend. And Deb is on vacation this week, and thanks to Chris for being our engineer. And if you know of a nonprofit that should be on the show, please email me at npi@davidunger.net.
Weights are tying me down. I can't be sure that there's something in store that will quench my furious appetite. I'm a constant seeker in Converse sneakers.
And you've been listening to Nonprofit Insider, WMPG, doing its darndest to inform and educate its public. And coming up, Zavusky Ruskis, the crazy Russian. And wild and wacky music that you are going to love. And don't forget, the weather today, as my sweetie would say, weather in a word is wonderful. Or perhaps lovely. Or maybe just swell. But there is a 50% chance of showers. Other than that, you're enjoying wonderful sunshine here in Maine. And we'll see you soon.
Off the air, I don't know what's going on.
What do you want? What do you want to start with? What do you want to start with
Keep
there?
playing your theme song.
Artur. All righty.
Too big for tourist towns. Yeah, might leave a few friends behind, but these weights are tying me down. I can't be sure that there's something in store that will quench my furious appetite. I'm a constant seeker in Converse sneakers, always chasing.